frequency occurs very infrequently in populations outside of the region of sub-Saharan Africa. So the Cinchona, I think it's called, if I'm pronouncing that right, it's a national tree of Peru, right? So they were using this to cure malaria back in Peru, right? So this is around Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador. Shut the fuck up, bro. You guys just want to argue? Look, do you guys just want to argue, or do you want to listen to a scientific study? You asking for evidence, but I'm trying to give you evidence. You keep interrupting. Shut the fuck up. Well, let him finish. I can't do this shit. He's going somewhere, so I think you should let him finish. See, this is the problem. Y'all don't want to hear this shit.
Come on, bro. You get
when the evidence is presented.
Don't get distracted. Finish off the topic.
So, protection against Plasmodium vivax malaria is conferred by the Duffy-null allele or the Duffy negative antigen, right? So, in 1955, many so-called African Americans were found to be resistant to PVvax malaria in a paper titled Experimental Testing of the Immunity of Negroes to Plasmodium vivax. The so-called Negroes were Americans. The first paragraph in the paper of the study, one of the first observations made about this laboratory was established in 1931, was that American Negroes are relatively insusceptible of Plasmodium vivax,
your consistency and in your
to malaria.
When you really made a major U-turn on an issue of that importance in such a short time. Secretary, tell me why you think people should have constant confidence in your consistency and in your
other diseases as ancient, adaptive, and persistent forms. So African Americans are resistant to malaria. It's safe to say we were the first ones on the planet. That's coming from Oregon State University and Science Daily on November 4, 2011.
So, wow, bro, you made us wait.
That was the dumbest argument I've ever fucking heard.
Let me say one thing. I don't want to argue now. Let me say this.
If African Americans are
so proud to be Latin American and whites are so proud to be white, why are they sitting in the sun? Why are they sun tanning? Why are they trying to do everything to try to be black? To look black? Answer that question, because
why do your bitches spend several $100s on white women's and Indian women's hair? Why do you guys end up getting those jobs? No, you listen. Why do you guys bleach your skin? Why do you do all of that shit? I'm just curious.
Man, you want to be black so bad. That's what you do. No, you're doing shock value, my boy. But you want to be black.
It's not shock value. It's like literally a real thing.
All you motherfuckers want to do is argue, but when facts are presented to you, you don't want to accept the facts. Look at the American Journal of Physical Anthropology in 1983. It literally says the Black Caribs have, what is it called?
Melanin.
They are immune to PVvax malaria and were chosen by
First of all, you're stating something that's obvious. When it comes to black people, hold on a second.
It's just obvious.
When it comes to black people, shut your fucking mouth. When it comes to black people, yes, I'll connect the dots here.
Area is native to
yeah, I get it. You're running your low IQ mouth. Just shut up. Now, when it comes to black people in the United States, we all know
are not FDA.
When it comes to malaria, when it comes to the malaria that you would see in Africa, which, by the way, your genes, you can look this up. Okay, the malaria that you get in South America, you're not immune to, okay? Now, your genes do protect you against malaria in Africa, yes. That is what you see. This is what I'm saying. And so, if you're trying to make like this connection that somehow you guys are, you and the original people and your tied to all other people.
Calm down.
Why is it that you guys are not immune to the malaria that the Native Americans and the indigenous people of the Americas in South America and in the Caribbean are immune to? When I say indigenous people, I'm talking about the Taino and so forth. I'm not talking about you fucking black people. So why is that the thing?
Tainos, you know that, right? Watch your mouth.
You know we Tainos, you know that, right?
Yeah, Taino. So
you know that's black
Can
people,
y'all
right?
be quiet so he
Tainos are not black people.
Tainos are
When they were first encountered, they were.
Are you dumb?
When they were first encountered, they're actually described as being a good-looking group of people that were not that dark complected.
That's a fact.
That's a reality.
Can I just say this? Caribs are Amerindians. You guys gotta make up your mind. FBA African, because I hear some of the FBA talk, and you guys claim the original people of this land. Then you differentiate yourself and say that you have no African differentiation. First of all, so let me say this. My family, my mother's side is South American. They are Amerindian mix. So when you say Carib, when you say Arawak, when you say Taino, those are Amerindian people. When you talk about Native Americans, those are people of Serbian descent. Two different groups. Native Americans and Amerindians are two different people. So the only thing that I'm saying before people become sensitive, hold on. Before people become sensitive, just be specific on who you're talking about, because there's a lot of mixing up who is who. So being specific when you're making this point, that's all that I'm saying. That's it. It's not an argument.
You blacks aren't Amerindian. They're trying to steal other people's culture.
So how? Hold on, wait. So how can you tell us who we are? But
I never told you. I never told you who you were.
Wait a minute.
I'm not answering the question because I never told you who you were.
Hold on.
I never told you who you were.
Listen.
I don't have to listen. You're giving out false information.
You're a mixed person.
So what are you talking about? Listen, if you're FBA is FBA. Amerindian is Amerindian. Those are two different groups of people. So what are you talking about?
That's the same group.
So you're Amerindian. Hold on. So you're Amerindian?
The original Amerindian were black.
Okay. Hold on. So when you say blacks, what are you referring to? Are you referring to African Americans? Are you referring to FBA? What are you referring to? It's nothing to get sensitive about. No one's being disrespectful. It's a simple question. No one's being rude. It's just a simple question.
Hit the low and he sold all of
percent of the population.
at the U.S. dollar price, maybe around 270. And then gold started to move up this century, and it's gone straight up for 25 years. It initially went from 270 up to 1900. So for 10 years, it went from 270 to 1900. Then it consolidated those gains. The lowest it got was 1,050 in 2015. So it went from 270 up to 1900. And then from 2011 to 2024, it traded between 1,000 and 2,000. Most of the trading took place around 1,500, 1,600, 1,700, but it went sideways for 13, 14 years. It just broke out last year, and now it's having another leg up that I think is similar, but probably bigger, to the leg up from 2001 to 2011, and so we're going way up. But this is a huge move. Gold has outperformed the S&P 500 this century, even if you factor in the dividend yield. So just holding gold under your mattress from the last 25 years, if you sold it now, you'd have more money than holding the S&P and collecting those dividends. So it, so this is a major change. But we still have a long way to go in deflating this fiat bubble, and your people are seeing that in gold. Anyway, look, I got to get going here. It's after midnight.
Peter, can I just get in a quick thing before you go?
Yes.
Please. Okay, so basically,
The master
I don't
said,
even know why this whole
work on strange doctrines does harm. The master said, you shall I teach thee what is understanding to know.
There is no bottom. I mean, nobody knows where the bottom is in like Bitcoin or whatever.
Ferocious fascism.
$5. Who knows? But like, of course, I'm a silver maxi, so I'm gonna say like, when I buy silver, I'm not worried. Like, where is it gonna go? At some point, it just can't go to zero.
Well, it's not going to go. Look, I don't think silver can get much below 30. I mean, it could. It got into the 29s a week or two ago, but I think at 32.50, your realistic downside in silver is 10%, whereas it can go up 1,000%. I mean, so you don't have a lot of risk, in my opinion, in silver, right? I mean,
what I wanted to say is the guys, Silva Deason and James brought up David Bateman.
What's up, guys? I don't have much to say.
395 tons of silver. And the point is, I think people are just like, the market for silver, I think, at these prices is so thin that literally I don't even know why people are all into Bitcoin when literally we kind of figured out the world production, yearly production. It would be like 66 other Davids could buy up a year's production. I mean,
look, they're buying Bitcoin because they've been brainwashed, because they're greedy, because they're and because the fact that Bitcoin went up so much, that has clouded people's judgments, right? They and it's like cognitive dissonance. There are people now who are so like emotionally invested in Bitcoin, they've already spent the millions that they're confident they're going to make, and so they can't. It would so destroy their whole worldview to acknowledge that what they believe is not true. Again, it's almost like somebody who is a religious fanatic trying to get them to believe that their God isn't real, and they've already picture their whole afterlife with their God, and you're telling them that that's not real. So they're not going to accept that because it destroys their whole sense of self and everything that they base their life on. So, I mean, people are stuck and they're wedded in this cult of Bitcoin, and they're never going to change their minds, no matter what I say. And the fact that they can say, well, Peter, you were saying the same thing when Bitcoin was 100 and when Bitcoin was 1,000. So because I was pointing out this from the beginning, they think that I don't know what I'm talking about just because the bubble got so big. Well, they're just going to learn the hard way. And I know that there's some people that I can't help. But I'm hoping that some people will say, you know what, maybe the guy's not a total idiot. Maybe there's something to what he's saying. And at a minimum, let me take some chips off the table and do something else. So I don't have an all or nothing bet. But anyway, I gotta keep going.
I completely, just one last point.
You had to get dropped. Mama by the microwave too long, all type of shit. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's like what it is. Putting a girl in a cave is an act. It's not an attraction.
Correct. Despite that threat, that white dude pressed him because ain't nobody else could press him. He was probably the only one in physical condition to maybe have a chance to protect at least his people against that threat.
What do you mean to protect though? He came
You got somebody who's wilding in your tent amongst your teammates. You want him to get
No. He came to him. I was like, yo.
No, Nathan.
Come on, you gotta get up on here.
Nathan, look, do you understand that the Carmelo ended up validating the white kid by reacting the way that he reacted? So like, if it's just a dude that's just chilling, like you had nothing but good energy or whatever, like we don't even know what came up, like all the shit that led up to the request for him to leave, right? We don't know any of that. It's gonna be a lot of hearsay. But I do know this, that the moment this man was requested to leave the tent, he had put his hand in his bag and grabbed his knife. That little nigga's wildin'.
Do you know he's a college student and athlete, Jimmy?
What are you talking about?
Carmelo is a 3.7 GPA and captain of a football team and all that shit.
Carmelo? What does that matter? Why does that matter?
Because he wasn't.
Why does that matter? I was an honor student. I was an athlete. I went to the best university. I went to one of the best universities. So what? So what?
But you gotta admit though, for me, I look at it like this: if my goal is to get home, if a dude, anyone put their hands in their bag, I'm not gonna approach him. That's it. Because that's my goal, to be able to get home. Like that ain't worth it.
How do you get home stabbing white kids in their chest? How do you get home? How do you get home doing that? How do you get home? Do you understand? You just gave your life away. So Carmelo Anthony, so the white kid lost his life, but Carmelo Anthony ends up the biggest loser in the situation.
I don't know. I think the biggest loser is the one that's 6 feet under.
So Carmelo is the one that ended up losing more than the white kid. The white kid is dead.
He isn't in jail. He's not gone.
It doesn't
I think he's going to get out. Start free, to be honest.
His name goes on a resume. Like, literally, he's done. He's done. His kids can't even say that's my father. He's done. Like, that kid, he's a leper. Now, in America, he lives in Texas. He's a leper. I wouldn't fuck with this kid. I think the kid's a coward. I wouldn't fuck with his children. You understand? Like,
he's going to be able to get over.
I think you're doing the most for
I'm not doing the most. I'm not doing the most at all. That's very low. What that kid did, all that kid needed to do was just have integrity. If the kid presses you, fight it. Fight. Don't be fucking coward. Fight. Don't fucking matter. Don't fucking matter. Listen, when he was bigger than you, when he was bigger than you, he was scared that you fucking was gonna live goddamn fuck. You didn't do that neither. Right? You didn't do that neither. So he didn't listen to the kid. So now he said, look, I'm 90 pounds lighter. I need to chill out. Maybe I should just leave the tent. Right? You didn't want to do that. Then fight. Be a fucking man. Fight. It's the most. What Carmelo did was the most bitch coward you could do.
I want to know everything. I want to know.
So even for him to say that, let's say that though, the difference is whether it's cowardice or not. There's a range of responses that anybody could take. Jimmy, I agree with you. I agree that we could call him cowardice, we could call him a pussy, we could call him whatever, but that does not implicate him and say that he's a murderer because he was aggressed upon. Ultimately, we have to figure out who the right and wrong is, and if we go with all the subjectivity of what the unjust system is going to do, especially what we already know that how they treat black men specifically with sentencing and in this country. Okay, I don't give a shit what the law is going to say. I already know this kid fucking lost. It's all about this law. But it's not about hold on. Red, can you shut the fuck up? You said you don't talk a lot. I gotta be honest. Honestly, Honestly, it's better when you don't talk. It's better when you don't talk because there's a reality of what actually is happening. Me not saying it isn't going to change that. There is not enough. Tell him to shut the fuck up. Can you unmod this bitch and put him in the goo? He's fucking just being annoying. Because you're fucking annoying. You're annoying. I had a fight with you for hours yesterday to just stop interrupting me. You just want to continue to interrupt. No, it's annoying. It's fucking annoying. You can't have a conversation because he's fucking tyrannizing. Because he's tyrannizing the entire fucking stage. Everybody else can have a peaceful conversation. Well, still are. It's the case right now. But the fact is, I understand that. I understand that. The fact is, still are. It's not blood sugar, it's blood pressure. Okay. No, my blood sugar is great. I have a 4.5 A1C. Alright, focus on. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is we could say that he's cowardice. We could say whatever. There's a range of responses that he could have taken. But the one thing that we cannot say is that he's morally culpable as a defender. He was in a defense position. He was not the aggressor. And if there's any argument, because I've not heard a good argument in any case, a reasonable and rational argument to remove the onus and the responsibility of how from the aggressor onto the person who was wronged.
All right. So here, I request someone to get out of my car, and then they grab at their knife. Who's
different than your authority? You have the authority.
So authority. Okay, so I'm under my team's tent. My team. My team paid for this tent. This is my team's area. I told this person, hey, can you leave my team's tent? They grab at their knife. Who's the aggressor?
Why even bother sharing? Okay, well, you're wrong about a few things. The kid didn't have any authority. That's where we're going wrong with thinking this. But you don't have any authority. So what should have been done is allow the authorities to have him move. Hey, you shouldn't be here, blah, blah, blah.
That doesn't matter here. So
if you're in the commission of committing a felony, you don't get to self-defend.
Yeah, like, look.
The dude was carrying a weapon.
We're at the beginning of it, not at the end of it.
Yeah, but let's not even focus on the weapon.
He's carrying a weapon on school property.
Let's not focus on the weapon here. Let's say white kid sees a stranger. Probably it's gut feeling this could be a threat. I don't trust him. I don't know him. Maybe he looks funny. Who knows? And I request, hey man, can you leave our space? And then this kid gets upset, grabs at his knife. The white kid is the aggressor. That's what you guys are arguing here. That the
How
white
do
kid is
you know
the
he
aggressor.
said, hey man, can you leave our space? And he didn't just go up and say, get the fuck out of here.
I'm sure it started as a request and the black kid refused to fucking acknowledge or listen. And it escalated from there. The witnesses. And it escalated from witnesses. To the police report. Go from there.
So it doesn't matter, right? We're talking about this is, first of all, it's public property. And if you're going to say, oh, it's part of his school's team, so it's his team's tent, right? You're still, that's not, he's not the responsible part. Hold on, just wait, just hear me out. It comes down to private property and it's public property, right? And it's the public property of the school, right? So that's going to get into a whole new nuance of discussion, and it's never going to come down to being private property. You're not going to say, because if the kid he's 17 and you could say, oh, he owns a tent, but would you say the same thing if they were 10 and it was the same thing, the same situation, or if they were 5, right? No, the reason is because hold on, I'm talking fourth. Right, no, but what I'm saying is we don't have to use a stabbing situation. We could say the same thing if one child went up to the other and said, get out of the tent. It's still the same circumstance with age. You understand what I'm saying? Follow the logic. Hold on. Please. I forget what I'm going to fucking say. And it's so crazy. Everybody tells me I don't complete sentences and I ramble because I never get to fucking get any shit out that I want to get out. The point is when we listen, if anyone's responsible, it's the schools that are responsible. Their children, they're not legal adults. We entrust them when we hand our children over. Hold on. When we entrust the school, that's what we're doing. We're handing our children. Fuck you guys. I'm done. You guys, you know what? This is the way you guys. This is how you guys want to act, and this is why I can't be here. I have to go to rooms where there are actual civil people, so we can have a discussion.
Okay, baby. Come on, yo, stop interrupting. You see how y'all ain't leave, bro? Like, y'all gotta learn how to control yourself muscles, bro.
We're trying to have a discussion. They've been talking for
Yeah, man, y'all gotta learn how to control yourself muscles. All that dang bad talking and This is what he did.
What you guys doing? You mad because your white girl ain't gonna pat you on the head. Come on, they mean even. Some more DT. What you guys are getting into right now is persons having authority.
Rob was abusing people, bro.
Comparing this situation.
That's just crazy, bro.
Comparing this situation to asking someone to leave your property or get out of your car is not the same thing, because persons having authority in that particular situation over their own property.
Right.
I'll adjust the analogy.
Sure.
We're both on public property.
Yeah.
Get away from my personal space. You're too close proximity.
But he wasn't on the team.
So who's the?
Well, hang on, God. It's a thought experiment.
If I say, hey, you're in very close proximity to me, I don't feel safe. Can you please get away from my personal space? You're too close to me right now. Or you're in close proximity of the people that I love and care about. You're a stranger. Please move from us. And then your reaction is to put your hand in your bag and grab a knife. Who's the aggressor?
The aggressor is the person reaching into the bag.
Absolutely, that's very logical. That's what the black kid did.
Yeah, he's reacting.
But the problem is he's on school. He's on school property with a weapon. Okay.
That doesn't make a difference.
It does. Listen, I'll explain why. You cannot.
We're talking about
You cannot use a firearm.
I'm talking about. One second.
Okay, I want to explain that.
No. Let's stay wait.
Let's still go and explain it.
No, because he's changing it. He isn't changing the same example. Jimmy was given. Jimmy gave a totally different example, and you're talking. Are y'all serious right now?
You don't know what example
you didn't get an example what Jimmy gave?
You don't know what example I'm giving because I didn't give it.
I know you didn't agree with Jimmy, and I'm disagreeing with him.
Nathan, what example did
Jimmy gave an example, and you agreed with it. I'm disagreeing with you agreeing with Jimmy's example, and you bringing up the whole. You don't get what's going on right now, still, dog?
Oh, this is so dumb.
It's a terrible thing.
He's doing the banana man thing.
You don't even know
Another problem.
No, okay, let me break it down for the dum-dums inside the room. So Jimmy gave an example of him with his family, and he told this guy to leave the area, and the guy pulled out a weapon, right?
Yep.
And Stilgar said the guy who pulled out the weapon is the aggressor. I disagree with that. And as soon as he said, okay, let me explain. He was in the school grounds and he had a weapon at school. No, I'm talking about Jimmy's example.
Even in Jimmy's example, both of these individuals are in a public place. Both of these individuals are in a public place, and they have the same level of authority to be there in the eyes of the law. In the eyes of the law. Whether you're in a tent or whether you're in an assigned seat or whether any of those things, that's a policy problem on that particular geography. You both have the same right to be there. The only thing that the law is going to say in that regard is the person who feels uncomfortable has the right to leave.
That's my point. The person who tells me, the person who comes to me
next.
No, the person who can. Let me just break it down like I disagree. The person who comes up to me and tells me to leave is the aggressor. Me reacting to the aggressor doesn't make me the aggressor. I didn't just pull a knife for a reason.
And you're wrong.
The primary tool of self-defense, if the self-defense claims to be made here in this particular scenario,
If you could just listen closely, right? The reason why Nathan is wrong
is because the request is a reasonable request.
How
Right?
do you know it was reasonable?
Because Jimmy just.
Wait, are we going to get him on the road from last week then? Are we going to get him on?
No, we're not. In Jimmy's example, right? He came respectfully to Stilgar and made a request. At this point, Stilgar can decline. No, just in the example, Stilgar he could decline the request, or he could grant it, right? Because it's done in a respectful, reasonable manner. Now, if Jimmy would have went to Stilgar and said, "Hey, you cracker, right? He's provoking a response from Stilgar.
That would be fighting words. Fighting words. That's how the law addresses that. Yeah.
You said the public place. This is not the car.
Look. Let's get this through. The issue here, right? If they're making a self-defense claim,
this is
the primary item using that self-defense is
really.
By the very nature of you possessing an object is creating a felony, which in this case it certainly was. You're not allowed to have weapons on school property, whether you're a juvenile or not. Unless you're law enforcement, you're not allowed to have weapons on school property. It's not an option. It's a federal law. So this doesn't even change state by state. By the very nature of this individual having a knife on school property, he's already precluding himself on a self-defense case. If I'm in a post office, a federal post office, and I have my concealed carry firearm, and somebody comes in and robs that post office, and I shoot them, I can be held legally liable because I'm not supposed to have my gun there in the first place.
Can I sort of point out the quagmire in this entire circumstance? Because we have, in my example, it's sort of this. We talk about one aspect of this interaction, but there's a private property aspect of this that isn't discussed enough, and it's the tent itself, right? And so here you have individuals,
former CIA Director John Brest,
whose situation, like where they stand, is tied to the property
so
that they set up themselves so that they can utilize. This boy is also utilizing their property. They don't want this boy around them. Right? They don't want this boy.
That doesn't qualify as private property, though.
But it's their property, it's their tent.
Well, if you would have picked up the tent,
look, it's their tent.
You'd be correct if you would have picked up the tent and walked off.
That's the issue then. The issue is that the tent was set up and they're utilizing the tent. During the track meet, it's their tent. And where they stand is tied to where that tent was set up.
That doesn't make the legal.
That's the private property.
Hang on.
This boy was accessing their property.
No.
This is how it all started. This is why he was requesting. That's why he was requesting this guy to leave. It's like my proximity is dictated. My proximity to this tent is like I need to be using this tent. It's raining. I heard it.
No.
I heard it
by that implication, what you're supposing is that if I go and set up at a flea market and I put up a tent and people come in my tent to purchase my goods at my flea market,
no, it's not.
Let me land. Okay, I'm not selling anything. Fine, I'm not selling anything. I go into a public
Another example is the array of
I go into a public park
referred to
and I rent an easy art for my wife and I to sit in the shade.
The warming effects of global climate change.
And you enter that.
One that's
And I ask you to leave, and you refuse to leave, and I shoot and kill you. You're not right down the
White boy didn't shoot to kill anybody. That's the thing. You're turning it the other way around.
Jimmy.
So it's the person that intruded is the shooter.
But again, let me boil this down. Let me boil this down in the simplest terms. Erecting a tent on, in this case, it is private property, but it's publicly accessible private property.
It doesn't matter whether it's public vehicle is publicly accessible. Listen to me, it's not yours.
No, stop.
Yes, it's public. Your parked car.
Listen, I'm not making the whole game sense. No. You're confusing what I'm hitting my argument on. I'm not hitting my argument on the nature of the property. What I'm saying is, by erecting a tent in this place, that gives you no additional ownership of that space.
not about the
If that were the case, every time I pull an umbrella out, somebody standing on that under that umbrella could be confused as aggressive upon me. That's never going to fly in court.
I disagree with Dilgar.
Jimmy, that's never going to fly in court. That's never going to.
Hold on, real quick, Jimmy.
That's never going to fly.
So, what do you think about the extension of school grounds? So each tent has a name on it. One's Memorial High School, one's Centennial High School, right? So each tent is designated, and it is an extension of school grounds. Could this be considered? This tent is this high school. That tent is that high school.
No.
This is specific for Texas.
No.
It was raining, for Christ.
Yeah, and they had 12
That
tents.
means nothing, dog.
They had 12 tents.
He could have went to his old school's tent.
Roger.
They had 12 tents.
To the gate.
Where's the rest of them?
Most convenient and all.
Teammates in their teams.
Ford, you can make that argument as far as like time, place, and manner as to whether he was like going out of his way to go into a place to aggress upon somebody, but that doesn't make it like defendable property. That's not defensible property as a result of erecting a tent. That's just not how that works.
No, I think that because the designation, because you just use this, you said on school grounds, federal law, and then when you look up Texas and how. Because this is an actual like a public stadium, right? So it doesn't belong to an individual school. But because there's 12 different schools there, and it's a school district sanctioned event, each designated tent goes to a high school, and for that there's private property that is within the parameters of the tent. So we're all on the same team here in Chillism. We have all of our devices or whatever the hell we have out here on the bleachers. And that's what's here, and that's what we're protecting from people that are not supposed to be here from running through our stuff.
So I need one piece of case law that would establish that as protectable like area property. That's
your backpacks and everything.
No. I'm talking about by placing a bunch of objects in an area doesn't make it your area. You're still as much of a visitor. You're still as much of a visitor to that geography as anybody else. Look, if somebody takes your assigned seat in a stadium, you bought that ticket by the stadium jurisdiction, by policy and procedure, and by their demand to trespass you or not trespass you, you're entitled to that seat. By the laws of the state, you're not legally entitled to that seat. You're in a place where you're just as legally justified as anybody else.
Still going.
Somebody stole my seat at the hockey game, so I shot.
What's the nature?
No, you're wrong.
No,
somebody go move that person. Somebody would go move that person, right?
You have a thing. The thing is yours.
Somebody would move that person, right? Let's work with this analogy, just real quick. Somebody at the hockey game would go move that person, right?
Yes, but they would remove that person by authority of policy and by a lack of adherence to that policy. All right, I'll explain.
Wait.
No.
Go to Memorial High. Come on, man.
Hang on.
Bro, we're using your analogy.
Samoa, you cannot funnel my position into your
I don't know.
allow me to explain.
Genuine integrity.
I'm not going to be allowed to express my position in its totality, and then you're gonna bastardize it. And that's no. Just let me land. You don't understand my position.
But he's being attacked by
Haven't
people.
finished the thing I was trying to say.
Come on, man.
See, this is no, you want to control the pace of the conversation. You're not going to allow me to clarify my position.
Right, the authority at the hockey game can remove.
Okay, let him finish. I have some questions for him.
Yeah, go ahead and finish. Go ahead.
You're not breaking any laws by sitting in an unassigned seat in a stadium. You're only breaking a law if that facility says, "Sir, it is our policy that you must sit in your assigned seat. And if you refuse to sit in our assigned seat, we'll have to ask you to leave. And if you don't leave, you're then trespassing and breaking the law." You're mixing up policy and procedure of a private property with legalities in a particular area. I'm legally allowed to carry my firearm in the state of Pennsylvania. If I walk into Target and Target says you can't have your gun here, you have to leave. I have to leave or I'm trespassing.
No,
that's the differentiation.
Samoa, would you allow me?
And then they asked the question to the AI.
Samoa, would you allow me to ask the Lord?
Considered private property. Hey guys, I typed this question just for you guys. Just gonna mention it. Is it test?
Yeah, still going. I'm gonna ask you a couple questions. get clarity here. All right.
Well, I'm gonna go right after
you
because
just
I'm gonna catch him.
so do you believe that the tent that says Memorial High School was for Memorial High
I would
School?
say it's tantamount to a sign seating arena. That's why I made the analogy. It's a sign seating.
But do you believe
the tent belongs to them?
So do you? So okay, fine. That's question one. Question two. In an event where it's raining a lot, which it was, would you then presume that them sitting under the tent during the rain would be them using their tent?
Certainly.
Yes. All right. So we've established that the Memorial High School tent was for the Memorial High School team, right? And that them sitting under their tent was them using their tent. Now, if a stranger who is not a part of Memorial High School then sits under that same tent, would you then say that that stranger is also using their tent?
Sure.
All right, here. All right. We've established a line of logic here.
Okay.
So now the stranger that is not a part of Memorial High School is now using something that isn't his. Would you now agree that that is true?
Yes, and I think I see where you're going with this. I don't want to interrupt you.
All right.
I'll get out of your way, but I'd like a chance to clarify on some of these questions because some of these questions might be lacking in some necessary nuance.
So therefore, the people that are a part of Memorial High School's team using their tent would be well within their right to request this individual to not use their tent. Would that be true?
They're within their right to request, but they don't have any power to enforce that request.
Oh my goodness.
And also consider they're minors. If there was, it should have been an adult that was
No, just minors. So we're almost there.
No, let them cook.
Did you do everything else, Jimmy?
So you believe that it is their tent. You believe that they are in their right to request, but they're not in their right to enforce.
Well,
okay.
Well, they can enforce it, but only in one way, and that's to disassemble or remove the tent.
And so they are forced to go elsewhere with their tent and hope that this stranger doesn't follow them.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. So this is where I disagree.
From a legal perspective, this is certainly true.
Using the word legal. So just real quick. So we know that
legal is going to be the main crux of this issue.
All right, cool. All right. So in your hockey example, the people that are the authority, policies, whatever, they have the authority or they have the ability to ask this person who's sitting in your seat to be removed. Okay. So each tent is a representation of each individual school. So that individual tent, by the same logic, the school, Memorial High School, has the ability to, or the authority to ask anybody that's underneath their tent to move.
No. That's where it goes wrong. And I'll explain why.
Well, let me just show you, so if you look this up in Texas, the reasons why these high schools, there's 12 of them, right? And this is a stadium that's not, it doesn't belong to any of the high schools or whatever. It's just used, whatever.
Who does it belong to? It's got to belong to some district or something, right?
It belongs to the city. Yeah,
okay.
To the city.
So legally, that's public property.
No. So just real quick. So if you look at school property, there's a designation that they call an extension. Whenever schools or the school district rents a stadium or whatever this is, it's underneath this extension of school grounds. And this is the law that everything that is school grounds, this here, because it's sanctioned by the school, is school grounds. It's an extension of Memorial High School. This is an extension of Centennial High School.
Simone, you still talking about this shit?
All right. Do you agree with that or disagree with that, Stilgar?
I would probably disagree with that in the bounds of the law. I think so.
Well, the law recognizes this. That's why it's a no-gun zone, even though it's a public area, because it is a sanctioned.
This is a school event.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't know that boils down to the specular. I don't know that you can boil that down to the specular level of individual tents belong to individual schools. I don't think that's how that works. And even if that were the case, this is
an extension of school grounds.
You know, I hear you. But I believe that would refer to the stadium in its entirety, not down to individual tents. You can't say that he is trespassing on that school by extension by being in that particular school's tent when he's on this larger property. I don't think the law is going to.
No, I'm saying each individual school is going to have the authority, just like the hockey place, to ask people that are sitting where they don't belong to move.
Authorities from the school. Sure.
Yes. All right. So the authority from the school doesn't have to go somewhere else.
If there's 4 or 5 schools there, the principals, maybe teachers, there might be. There might be bounds within the law that suggest that they would have the authority to ask him to leave, potentially.
So they don't have to pick up their tent and move it, right?
Well, no, because I don't. The thing is I think that would represent the stadium as a whole. I don't think you can get down to the specular level of the tent.
Still, you can't speak about the stadium as a whole because schools are attached to certain districts, and districts are attached to a certain group of taxpayers. Full stop. And so when we're talking about this one high school, we're talking about this one community that paid for that campus. That's why it's private.
Right, but this
shit.
A similar analogy to this would be to like if you were to rent a wedding venue, you are in control of that wedding venue. You have established yourself as having some level of authority on kicking somebody out of the wedding. It's not your private property, but you've rented it. It's a private party. You can decide to preclude people if you wish. Right? I don't think you can boil that down to individual tents. I don't think you can say, "Hey, this is my wedding venue. You're allowed to be here. I don't have the authority to ask you to leave, but I can't ask you to leave my table."
Yeah, but we're not talking about a venue per se. We're talking about private property and the usage of it. This stranger was using your shit. So what's more analogous is somebody takes your phone and starts making
I see it.
Your parents bought
Let me clarify.
Took your phone and started making phone calls.
No, that's not the same thing.
That's the best analogy. No, it's the best analogy. You didn't pay for it.
No, it's not. It's
your
not.
parents bought it for you, just like your parents paid those property taxes to fund your school for your school to buy these supplies. So, like
Jimmy, I want to make sure we're not making the same fatal mistake that's made in this room quite often. I believe that you're mistaking my disagreement with you as a misunderstanding of your premise. I understand your premise, and I believe I can steel man it. But I believe I'm disagreeing with your premise because I think it's fundamentally flawed in this hyper-specular, zoomed-in division of whose property is what property. He didn't pick up the tent and move it. He didn't relocate the tent. He didn't change the position of the tent. He's just standing underneath it, and I don't believe the law is going to support that then is tantamount to him essentially trespassing.
That is the definition of using a tent. That's what you do with
Hey guys, isn't Ghost the guy who records the rooms? Like, was that the guy you were talking about?
No.
Yeah, kick that faggot out.
Dean is not.
If you don't want to be recorded.
Before we do that, Dean wanted to say something earlier, and he never got a chance to say it.
Yeah.
On Dean?
Yeah, I was just saying that even if let's say this private property, I think the greater point is that he's a minor, and if it was the school's tent, it's up to an adult to enforce it or a staff member, not some student minor to take it in his own hands to kick somebody out. So I think that he was in the wrong for doing that, trying to bully this kid on a rainy or pouring day out of this tent. But let's just say it is considered private property and a public stadium, the school's tent. It's not in the kid's position to do that. So for a responsible adult, a staff member, a teacher, or a coach, whomever, but not for the kid to enforce it himself.
Also, if there was anyone else under those tents that did not belong to the school, like under the wrong tents, your argument goes out the window. Another thing, you had to make sure everybody belonged under those tents.
Damn, they finally kicked me. So that just means I'm gonna have to go back in on another account because we'll have to keep the pressure up. If I can't even find it.
And they knew he didn't belong. So Austin went over and told him, yo, you gotta go. Austin's not the fucking police. He's not an adult. He's not a booster member. He's not anything. He went over there and like, yo, you gotta go. Pretty much like, yo, get him out of here. And when he didn't want to go out in the rain, he refused to go out in the rain. Remember, he wasn't looking for a confrontation. The kid approached him. That's when he actually, pushed him and assaulted him. That's the first time. And the kid said to him, push me and see what happened. Remember, guys, he didn't. They got the police report, and this was not me. The police report that Austin's friend said they were arguing back and forth, and then the guy said, "Push me."
This is even better than chillism. It's even stupider.
Was that Anthony or was that? No. And Austin's friend said that Austin and Carmelo exchanged words, and then the only thing the friend said on the police report was Austin then tell me that Anthony said, "Push me and see what happened." He didn't tell him what Austin said. And that leads me to believe that if Austin went over there in a nice way and what's called Austin was, he said Austin went over there and said, "Hey, can you please leave?" He said, "Fuck out of here, touch me, see what happened." That's what I would say. Like, yo, he was nice. There was no call for this. But all he said is they exchanged words, and then all of a sudden the guy said, "Push me and see what happened." And so Austin pushed him. Okay? And then they exchanged words some more, and then he grabbed his bag, and he reached his bag, and none of us thought he had a weapon. So he said none of us thought he had a weapon. It implies that there was more people involved. None of us thought that he had a weapon. It's not like they all sat back and Austin was by himself. None of us thought, guys, if anyone can find that police report, it's online and read it. None of us thought he had a weapon. I mean, he had no, more than that audience. Probably he had co-conspirators. People that were complicit. None of us thought he had a weapon. Okay? And everybody like, oh, he got nothing. And so then Austin said, they have me exchange words again. And then he said, punch me and see what happened. Now Austin already pushed him, obviously, if he told Austin, like, I'll push your ass out of here. Whatever. And now when he grabbed him up, why? Like, yoked him up. Like that.
Let's discuss that more. Was he within the right to kick somebody out of the tent, or should that be the responsibility of an adult who manages the tent?
Yeah, I think he doesn't have authority. Rights to request. So
Even an adult doesn't have authority.
He can request, but to enforce. Requesting is one thing, but to enforce is a different thing.
Well, the point that I'm at is that he made a request, like a reasonable request.
But
then he tried to enforce it.
Enforce
Oh my God. Yes, because I want to start at the very beginning of the interaction with what the independent witnesses have said. Do you believe that it was a reasonable request?
It's dependent
Are you
upon how
familiar
he
with it?
So, can I ask you a clarifying question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you
Using
making
emojis.
a moral argument or a legal one?
It doesn't matter, just for conversation.
No, it does matter. There's a very strong distinction between the two. Things can be considered immoral or socially unacceptable.
How these guys are viewing it. I'm making a legal one.
Okay, so the legal argument would just be person having authority, and a 17-year-old who's a participant and a visitor viewing this doesn't have any more authority than the person who is potentially trespassing. Even if he isn't being trespassing, let's concede that by nature of being under the tent, he is the extension of that particular school and he is trespassing. Someone who isn't a representative of this property doesn't have the right to ask him to leave.
No, I think the problem here is that you're adding certain things to this. So we just said 17-year-olds, right? So we can say that
Even adults would be qualified as persons having authority, and they don't.
I'm having a different discussion, bro. I'm trying to help this guy out by just carrying on with his conversation with minors and what we expect from them. 17-year-olds know this is my designated area, so it's a reasonable request for me to say, hey man, your tent's over there. Do you mind if you move your stuff over there so we can have?
So you're actually making a moral argument, but calling it a legal one. That's the problem.
Exactly. Wait, hold on real quick. The reason why. Hold on. Just hold on.
But it's a hypothetical, Don. He's making a
Fucking weirdo.
Hey,
Steve,
how long are you gonna talk about this? It's been a
think of however long I want to talk. What's the problem?
Because you're gonna waste our time.
Great. How can you a party that isn't his and wants to change the music?
Yeah, real quick question.
Fucking said. Come on, bro. Karate dance class white belt wannabe.
All right, so the word reasonable, and the reason why it's a legal question, the word reasonable happens to be in the self-defense statute, right? The word reasonable, how a reasonable person would perceive this situation. So yes, that's the reason why I'm using the word reasonable.
Yeah, the reasonable person is a very strongly held legal principle, but the reasonable person doctrine doesn't apply in this particular scenario the way you're using it. You're kind of
all right when you.
Oh my God, bro!
Do you know what I'm saying, Kitover?
I do know what you're saying. I think I can explain your position, and I can explain where you're going wrong. Your position is that this particular individual who was asking him to leave the tent was doing so fairly and reasonably. He wasn't being unnecessarily aggressive towards him. He didn't just immediately kick him in the dick and throw him out of the tent. He requested that he leave the space that he was occupying because he was unwelcome by the other people occupying that space. I understand that completely. Where are we with you? I'm sorry, let me stop there. Do you agree that I'm appropriately representing your perspective?
No.
So why don't you tell me what I'm missing?
All right, what I'm asking this gentleman here for a 17-year-old, if you believe it to be reasonable as a request, what would be the provoking action in the sequence of events that you would say this is what started it all?
Okay, so.
All right, so if there's a reasonable request, like if you declare this is a reasonable request, or if you don't declare it as a reasonable request, somewhere along the lines, this is where it starts right here.
You can make a reasonable request that you don't have the authority to enforce.
Bro.
I thought he was asking me. I yielded calm down for 3 minutes. Doesn't make it so.
Yeah, so one, I don't think it was reasonable request. I think that the moral thing to do would be to say, hey, it's raining outside, it's pouring outside. Actually, it wasn't just drizzle, it was pouring outside. Let this kid have a place to sit, to be protected from the rain, number one. Number two, let's say even if we consider a reasonable request, it's not within this person, the deceased, authority, in my understanding, to enforce that request. That's up to school administrators who are responsible. It's not the responsibility of him. He's not an enforcer. He's a minor.
All right, real quick question. All right, so then, do you think this is a reasonable response? A person says, "Hey man, your tent's right over there. This is for us. Do you mind if you go to your tent?" And your response is to put your hand in a bag and say, "Touch me, and you'll see what happens."
No, of course not.
That's a reasonable response?
Of course not.
No, hold on.
But there's some more that led up to that. There's more that led up to that. And I think you're not.
No, that's it.
No,
that's not this is
Bro, that's all we got.
You're making light of what.
Don, relax, man.
Don, everybody understands that we don't know precisely what was said. That's the facts of the case that will have to slowly but surely come out. But the fact of the matter is we're using that as a potential thought experiment. It's a presupposition we acknowledge.
Obviously, it was more than that, or he wouldn't.
What was it then, Don?
It's not obvious, Don. Nothing's obvious.
What is it, Don?
You can't take anything as assumed. Don.
It might have been the tone of his voice, might have been.
Might have been that. But you're saying it might have been obvious. It was obvious, but
I'm not arguing anything, right? All I want to do is try to test this dude, or just try to see where he's coming from, because he's taking a position that the request was not reasonable. And the reason why he said that was because it was raining outside, and he's assuming that the Centennial tent was across the city somewhere, or somewhere that was so far that the request was unreasonable.
Track and field, right? I mean, something else. The teams.
Right.
Well, right.
There were 12 tents in the stadium, but yeah, go ahead.
The point of the reasonable person standard is to establish some solidity in a subjective opinion. Do you follow what I'm saying there?
I think so, but I'm trying to get to a point where this guy doesn't agree with you that the response of Carmelo Anthony was the reasonable one.
The problem that is, regardless of how reasonable or unreasonable the request is, that doesn't change the level of authority the person has in that particular scenario. I can come up with potentially reasonable requests to ask you to leave Target, but if I'm not an employee of Target and I'm a customer just as you are, I have no more authority than you are to be there.
I really don't know.
I can make the request all day long. You have no more.
Provoke who?
Well, that's a little difficult to do without having all the details, but
I'm only going with the details we have now.
I suppose what I'm confused about then is how the reasonableness or lack thereof of the request establishes that.
Thank you.
So real quick, so the independent witnesses, everything that we have to reference, right? The independent witnesses said that Austin said, "Hey man," basically made a request that he goes to his own tent. This is our tent. Okay.
And in no way, shape, or form could that be an act of aggression.
What everybody's saying it is.
Well, asking him to leave is not an act of aggression. There's no case law that'll support that. None whatsoever. There's case law that'll support the opposite of that. It may or may not have been a reasonable request, but again, whether the request was reasonable or not, it does not give him the authority to ask him to leave the tent.
So the gentleman that was just speaking, right? The reason why it was unreasonable was because it was raining outside. To him, if you listen to his response.
Well, I think if we asked Dean, would you say that that's just your subjective opinion and doesn't have basis on the law?
Yeah. That's my subjective opinion.
But this is what we were saying, Samoa. This is why it sounds like you're making a moral argument, not a legal one.
I'm trying to find who provoked it, because if you agree that Carmelo provoked it, I read it all. I read it all, bro.
Samoa, I think it flew over your head. I did.
I'm 6'7", it's impossible. No, the reason why it's a legal one, right? The reason why it's a legal one is because in order for Carmelo Anthony, just wait till I'm done, bro.
90% of the time.
Yeah, just wait till I'm done, bro.
You are filibustering a little bit,
So I'm gonna tell you this right now. The reason why it is a legal one is because in order for Carmelo Anthony to claim self-defense,
just so we're clear, he's not
Samoa.
Yeah. Did you hear what he said? You guys said that I'm making a moral argument. I'm telling you I'm not. Now I'm going to explain to you why I'm
mistaken about that.
All right, but then why don't you listen to what I have to say, and then you can tell me if I'm mistaken.
I've already heard what you had to say.
What did I say?
First
Hold on. What's the legal question I'm asking?
And then the legal question I asked, you asked me about if I thought it was a reasonable request, and I think that's the moral position to take. So I stated my moral position.
No, I said I'm making a legal one.
Give me just 15 seconds. Laid it out again. I don't think under law, that an attorney, that he, one being as a minor, that he has the right to enforce that request.
Who said it?
To physically barricade, push, or obstruct that other minor from entering the tent. That's up to an authority, somebody in charge.
Sounds good. You're just repeating yourself.
Yeah, you didn't address that. You haven't adequately addressed that.
No, dum-dum. My legal issue is self-defense.
You're the dum-dum.
If Carmelo Anthony claims self-defense, the question is, if he provoked the conflict, can he claim self-defense? It's a legal question.
Right. Well, so Samoa, I think where we went wrong with that is
hold on. Come on, bro. Where we went wrong is that you kept on trying to subscribe things to me that wasn't there, bro.
No. Look, everybody knows the Samoa shuffle. We all know. I know there's not goalposts that attract me.
When I asked the question,
this is a goalpost shit.
Hold on. When I asked the question, and I'm going to be very clear here, when I asked the question, who do you think provoked it? If somebody says Carmelo Anthony, then we have our answer if he can claim self-defense or not for this person. If you say, no, it was Austin who provoked it, then we have a conversation where we can justify self-defense being attributed to Carmelo Anthony.
And that line of reason makes significantly more sense than debating whether
so then maybe you should hear the whole. Hear somebody's statement in its totality instead of just parsing shit out and responding to something that wasn't said. I didn't know where Dean was.
Right? I can explain why you're having problems.
Here you go trying to explain to me again. What the fuck?
I can explain why you're having problems with that though. The fact of the matter is
you keep cutting me off, bro.
No, it's because you did this analysis of whether the request was reasonable or not. And that's where it sounds much more like a moral argument than a legal argument. Your argument in and of itself. Hang on. Your argument in and of itself is poignant and
yeah, there's a reason why we can understand you, bro.
The reasonableness of the request in either direction.
Bro, you're just talking and we don't know what you're saying. Alright, so just anyways. So if Dean answers that Carmelo Anthony,
that's the potball that kills Samoan.
Bro, you're in the fucking Matrix, bro. How many times we gotta tell you that? Would you like to keep wasting your time? Go ahead.
I know you know how the Matrix works.
Alright, so how many times did you hear me say we can't hear you?
I didn't hear you say we can't hear you. I only heard the part where you said the Matrix.
Oh, that sucks for you.
You hear me now?
Right, so we heard everything.
Sounds like you hear me now.
That was a profound point. I thought everything you said.
It sounds like you hear me now. It sounds like you hear me now.
Bro, we can't hear you, bro.
You still can't hear me. Why don't I have a red bar then? I'm already responding to some of my statements.
Hey, Dean. You still there, man?
Yeah.
Alright, can you tell him that he was cutting out so he doesn't think they were lying to him?
You were cut out just briefly, like a little bit.
Yeah, very, very briefly. And Samoa's making it a bigger thing than it was for his own fun. It's cool.
Bro, whatever, bro. Alright, so
Dean's a new
guy, right? So just need to track it. Dean's a new guy. Dean says, hey guys, can I add this to the conversation so we can all kind of investigate it? What do you think about this 17-year-old? Okay, so this is a new line of conversation. So instead of chasing Dean away, I wanted to ask Dean a couple of questions to see how he felt about the situation. Do you think that's a fair way of engaging in this dialogue with Dean?
Totally, but it was totally reasonable for us to make the assumption that you were making a moral argument.
Listen to what he said. It's reasonable to make an assumption. And now look where you are.
What you do?
But what a waste of time.
Because I used the word reasonable, that makes you correct?
Yeah, so
this is a silly thing.
Hold on. Somebody says you're making a moral argument. I respond by saying, no, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Let me tell you how you are.
To your overall point, what did the reasonableness of the request change at all? If it was a completely unreasonable request, if you asked him to stand on his head, that wouldn't have changed your original position. The totality of your position stands regardless as to whether it's reasonable or not. Your position, I'm explaining it. Your position is the provocation. Who initiated the provocation? And if you initiate a provocation, are you then entitled to self-defense? From the results of the provocation.
No, you're not wrong.
Am I wrong? That wasn't your argument? This is the small shuffle round 3.
No, I said this again. I was asking Dean so that we could understand.
Yeah, this is the Samoa shuffle. This is deeply in the Samoa shuffle.
If Dean would have said,
this doesn't even know the name. You're right. You're absolutely
right. Is there
right.
a reason why you keep interrupting, bro?
Oh, you're not doing it? You're right. I'm telling you, you're right. You're absolutely right. I was mistaken. Reasonable.
No, that's totally fine.
You've been making a legal argument the entire time. You're right.
Yeah, you just don't know what you're talking about. So, Dean, if you would have answered to Austin being reasonable in his request, we could have been able to investigate that. If you would have answered Carmelo was unreasonable or reasonable in his response, then we would have been able to have a discussion about that. Because that opens up a whole new thread. Hey, what do you think about him putting his hand in the bag and then saying, put your hands on me
and then you'll find out or something.
I think Carmelo's response was, I think it was disproportionate. Definitely, I don't think it was.
No, the stabbing of the knife, or the stabbing of the heart.
I think it was disproportionate. Yeah.
No, that part's disproportionate. But what about his response? He
Even the threatening to use the knife is disproportionate.
I mean, he has come to
Just shut up, so hard.
Texas has this.
You might asshole. You have authority. You're I'm not leaving your tent. I'm not leaving your
Say
tent.
that to a girl.
I'm not leaving your. You have no authority here. So
Hey man, I'll give you a pass, but normally you're kind of funny. No, but the reason why I'm asking is the response was this, and tell me if anybody disagrees. The response was that if you're handed bag, you say, put your hands on me, and you'll find out. But hold on. So I'm asking, do you think this is a reasonable response? He put his hand on his bag, didn't show anybody what he had, and then he said, put your hands on me.
Perhaps. I'll tell you why. Because.
Oh, see, this is good, right, so far? He doesn't agree with you. Go ahead.
No. Just elaborate. We don't know exactly what Austin did, how he lunged at him. We don't know. I'm just looking, reading online, updates from the
The
witnesses.
police report, I just put the link.
Okay, so it depends. If he felt really threatened, if he has a right to stand his ground, I think it was disproportionate, definitely. But in Texas, you have your standard ground law, and I think it was a great point. Did Austin have any authority to enforce removing him from the tent? Could he physically do that? Was it within his authority to do that?
I think you're fast forwarding it to the enforcement.
No, I think they're interrelated. I think you have to you can't just look at piece by piece. You have to
Alright, so stand your ground doesn't apply if you're the one who provoked the situation.
it also doesn't apply if you're utilizing.
Austin provoked the situation. Austin provoked the situation.
It also doesn't apply if you're utilizing means of self-defense that you're not legally allowed to be in possession of in that specific geography. You're immediately precluded from using a knife.
The master said, in governing, cleave to good as the North Star holds his place in the multitude.